The Nordic states have always had a historically successful and friendly relationship with Namibia, of course, referring to the likes of Sweden, Iceland, as well as Norway. We are joined by His Excellency Liswaniso, the ambassador to that part of the world, representing Namibia in tonight's edition of Diplomatic COMMUNIQUE. I'm Ricardo Tlawasep. Good evening and welcome to the program. Comrade Ambassador, good evening and thank you so much for making time out to join us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me, sir.
Just for clarity, I think perhaps just to expound on the Nordic states that your mission covers.
We are located, first of all, I'm in Sweden. I'm
So that's the designation, is this
yes,
Sweden?
Sweden. And then I'm concurrently accredited to Norway, Denmark, and Iceland.
But so it's in terms of your mission, it's only a bilateral mission. There are no
It's a bilateral
multilateral
mission.
attachments there.
It's a bilateral mission, except that we have an international institute for democracy idea.
Oh, Idea International Institute for Democracy. That's
Yes.
a very, very important one. We'll reflect on that
Yes.
a little bit later on. But let's start with the bilateral relations with Sweden in particular. How would you describe the relations between the two countries?
The relations between Sweden and Namibia dates back during the dark days of the liberation movements. Sweden was the first country to support SWAPO in terms of finance, materials, and moral support. I speak frankly as a beneficiary from the support of Sweden. They provided us with Volvos, Scanias, when we lived in the camps in Zambia and Angola. They provided us with buildings, schools, medical facilities. No, they did a lot for us, Sweden in particular. And after independence, they continued to transition with us. As you can see, the Bank of Namibia, the first deputy governor was from Sweden. Thank you.
So just looking at that historical reflection, of course, with Sweden as well, we know the Nordic states have always been supporting of democratic ideals and implementation of that. We, of course, also know a lot of civil society organizations right after independence also came from there. Just reflect a little bit on the political, the shared common ideals around democracy and political outlook that the two countries have.
Sweden and Namibia, they share, really, they share common interests. By the way, after independence, Namibia and Sweden, they worked on a working group. That working group, immediately I took office in Sweden, we had that working group in Stockholm from here. From here, the delegation was led by the deputy minister then, Honorable Lucia Ipumbo. And that side, it was led by the State Secretary for Foreign Affairs. This working group is divided into two parts.
Please unpack it for us.
It has two sessions. One part is about political issues. Political issues in the sense what we would like to share domestically, SADC, African Union, and EU. The second session is commercial, where the business people come together. We brought business people, but, and they also, we join. And then we discuss in between us the possible areas of cooperation, investment opportunities.
What were some of the outcomes of this working group, if you look at the two different sessions, starting off with the first one?
Starting with the first one, we educate ourselves why Namibia has taken this position, and we explain our principled positions. This is bilateral. We talk frankly with each other. At the same time, it's SADC and the AU. So we take what is our position as Namibia, what is the position of SADC, what is the position of the AU. And also they tell us, we ask them, why is your position like this? Yes. So we come to the commercial part. The commercial part, when we had that session, we were supposed to, again, for them to come here. But because of the COVID, it was not possible to travel. After COVID, it was not also possible because there were elections. The new government is coming, but this time alone, as I met them, I met the state secretary, there is a very big interest in Namibia.
Of course, historically, like I mentioned a bit earlier on as well, those shared democratic ideals, support for civil society. If you look at the elections that you've just mentioned right now that took place in the country, what are some of the best practices we can take away from the way they deal with elections, of course, and how that is handled?
Well, elections in Sweden, you'll never hear them of any mismanagement. You'll never hear of any mismanagement. It is done and it goes. It's just like ourselves, how we do our elections. We do it very, 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 very smoothly. No arguments, and then we accept. Our elections, we share the best practices. We share the best practices of human rights, freedom of speech. As we do, they do that. So we have shared common principles.
Before we close off on looking at the bilateral relations with, of course, with Sweden, I know that the focus for this year, and of course the new mandate that you received during the heads of state conference from the president, of course, was to focus a little bit more on economic diplomacy. In terms of that, what does the trade balance between Sweden and Namibia look like? Are we currently trading products between Namibia and Sweden, or is that a space that we still need to explore?
It's a space that we still need to explore, particularly as I speak about the working group. I think we need to re-look at it and make sure that we have, as we visit each other regularly, we know the outcomes, where we have succeeded, where we have not, and why not. So it's important to review as we meet in this working group what has worked and what has not worked. So the aim of the working group was to boost trade relationship between the two countries. That was the aim. But it is still low. It's unbelievable low. So we need to explore more and open our investment opportunities to each other.
Are there perhaps maybe goods or commodities that you have identified on that end that could become part of this this trading between the two countries, or maybe some opportunities for local businessmen in Sweden?
Well, as Sweden is good in machineries, vehicles, pharmaceuticals. We are a rich country, minerals, fisheries, so agriculture. So we can really, those are still possible areas of cooperation, which we need to relook and see how best we can.
Well, Ambassador, we're going to take a quick break on diplomatic communique for tonight and we'll continue right after this short break. If you just joined us, good evening and welcome. Of course, we are joined by Ambassador Liswaniso, who represents the Nordic states in as far as diplomacy and bilateral relations are concerned. Stay with us. We'll be back with more after the break. Of course, home of the idea and democratic ideals, the Nordic states continue to enjoy good bilateral relations with Namibia. And of course, tonight on Diplomatic Communique, we continue speaking to His Excellency Liswaniso, our ambassador to those states on our bilateral relations. Ambassador, if we reflect a little bit more, of course, we spoke a bit about Sweden, but you also cover 3 other jurisdictions. One of the important ones, of course, we know is Norway, a state which has been blessed with abundant wealth. Also, of course, considered one of the most wealthy nations in the world. Can you reflect on the bilateral relations between the two? How would you describe our relations with Norway?
Thank you very much, sir. The same like Sweden, our relationship comes during the struggle for independence.
You can reflect on that a little bit for us.
Norway, using NGOs, supported us, giving us assistance, funds, and even they went further to help build the Ludima School in Congo.
Also, they financed the Ludima School in Congo?
Yes, they financed the Ludima School in Congo. They financed the Ludima School in Congo, as I said, using NGOs. And one NGO they were using is the NAMAS. NAMAS is Namibia-Norway Association. Now, after the independence, the founding president requested that the cooperation which was established in Elverum municipality should continue with Sumep municipality. So there is that cooperation in which the work together in culture, arts. There's a museum named after the mother of the founding president, Kondomolo Museum. Yes, they fund that. And also they are involved in conservancies in COMMUNIQUE, helping with the hippo in Kunene. Yes, so they are doing a lot. Now, coming to economic bilateral relations. Bilateral relations. You know, Norway, first, is our lucrative market in terms of beef.
I understand they pay the highest price.
They pay the highest price.
The best buyers.
they pay. It's a lucrative market for us. And they are serious to hold on that with Namibia. Now, Norway is a country that is famous for oil and gas discoveries.
Quite successful also implementing, and I was going to come to that, looking, of course, at the fact that now we are having so much excitement and investment going into the oil and gas sector. Total Energies brought a second rig.
Yes, yes.
Recon is busy up in the Kavango regions. What are some of the best practices that we can take away from Norway? Really one of the few successes that did not suffer from the resource curse.
I think it's the management of the natural resources.
Is that now, when you take, say, management, is that now from government managing the natural resources?
There is a company called Petoro. It's managing the resources on behalf of the government.
So Petoro would be an equivalent of a NAMCOR in Namibia?
Yeah.
So you're saying that in terms of, because this is it's a very, very important point, and I just want to get some clarity on this as well. Because you're saying that, look, we know that Norway is successful in terms of oil and gas. And number two, we are saying it is good management. But then that management, is that management from central government in terms of the laws that are governing the industry, or is that now the equivalent of NAMCOR, like you say, that is responsible for dealing with the day-to-day administration of the sector?
It is from the government. It's from the government. And maybe it's their really culture of management their resources. They really manage their resources for the benefit of their people and the future generation. So they are good at that.
Is there perhaps any plans for cooperation in that space, particularly looking at the oil and gas sector, whether it's technical transfer, whether it's skills transfer?
Well, as far as I understand, after the visit of the Vice President, there has been a lot of exchanges between Namibia and Norway. I frankly believe the Minister of Mines and Energy has been in Norway. And I believe he has traveled to Stavanger, where there is an oil museum talking about the history of oil and gas. So I believe they have learned lessons from there. The other area we were interested in Norway is fish farming. Right now, fish farming in the terms of salmon. And I went there myself. I took the Vice President there to see how they fish salmon. And fish farming feasibility study is at the advanced stage now.
Oh, is that feasibility study taking place here in Namibia?
Yes, because we seem to share the same waters somewhere. Yeah.
And salmon, if you look at salmon, of course, it's a really, really high value fish. I think only bacalhau, if I'm not mistaken, cost a little bit more than salmon in terms of kilograms. Who's providing support for this feasibility study? Are we doing this ourselves as Namibia, or is this being done in collaboration with the authorities in Norway?
It's a consortium from Norway.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
okay.
It's a consortium from Norway.
All right. So in terms of having, I don't want to say business start, but for lack of a better word, when are we looking at or expecting the industry to start from there in terms of this fish farming? Are the plans to start something big, or is it do the feasibility and see maybe what we can come up with?
It's still in the feasibility study. I can't
you don't want to preempt.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
We're quickly going to go for a short
Thank
break.
you.
You're watching Diplomatic Communique. If you just joined us, a very good evening to you and welcome. We're speaking to His Excellency Liswaniso as representing, of course, the Nordic states. When we come back, we continue with more here on Diplomatic Communique. When we're talking about Nordic states, of course, the big one is usually Iceland. And when we talk about Iceland, we know what the connection is between the two. When we come back after the break, we find out whether there's any concern for brand Namibia in Iceland. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Diplomatic Communique, and tonight we're speaking to the representation in the Nordic states of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. His Excellency Liswaniso is joining me in studio for this discussion. Of course, before we move on to the other two states, I really just wanted to touch on, because we know there's a lot of education partnerships and relations that happen between the higher education institutions in Namibia, Sweden, Norway, etc. Can you reflect on that a little bit? I know, of course, sometimes you're not directly involved as government, but those partnerships have major benefits for students and lecturers alike here in the country.
Thank you very much. I think sometimes we forget about education, not knowing that education is the basis of all these innovations. I was, when we had an official visit to Norway, we made sure that we put our universities into the delegation. UNAM and NAST, they accompanied the Vice President. They did their part while investment conferences were going on. Particularly in Norway, I was still impressed. I'm still impressed with Norway. The Inland University, immediately after the visit, the delegation came to Namibia to discuss partnership in terms of exchange of teachers, exchange of students, and also various. They came to NAST, they signed the agreement. They came to UNAM, they signed the agreement. And they came to Norway, to Sweden, they really signed the agreement. So the partnerships the universities are doing with various institutions in the Nordic is amazing. So it's just maybe to expose them more.
If moving on just out quickly to the last two countries, I think we will do doing a disservice if we do not really expound a little bit on Iceland. How would you describe our bilateral relations with Iceland?
The same. Our bilateral relations with Iceland dates back. Well, the support we received from Iceland might be different from Sweden, depending on the capacity. But anyway, Iceland also assisted us at the UN and the whole international forum to talk about our independence. And immediately after independence, they joined hands with the other three countries, Sweden, Norway, Finland, so they divided to see us in transition, and Iceland in fisheries, and Sweden in capacity building, as I said. Now, in Iceland, there is a university. It's a United Nations university. It provides scholarship for gender, fisheries, and land reclamation and thermal. So most of our people, our officials, have attended that university.
And that's what I wanted to touch on, Comrade Ambassador. If you obviously the big question for many people when the first time that they heard about relations with Iceland were also, of course, during fish rot. But before we even address that, I think it's important for us to expound a little bit on those relations, because there wouldn't be a Namibian fishing industry if it weren't for the support of Iceland. And for many people, they only heard about Iceland during fish rot. But just take us a bit back and just expound a little bit on that support that we had received from Iceland in terms of setting up our fisheries industries to what it is today.
Yes, when we come to fish rot, I think that should not disturb our relationship. By the way, we were warmly received when the DPM went there, warmly received. Good discussions about this fish rot thing. But then I believe it's an issue which is with the courts. I think we rest it there and continue with our relationship, which is cordial for me. Because when I presented my credentials, my talking to the president, I started about our good relationship. And then that good relationship, now we need to focus on economic diplomacy. And I promised that I'll do possible means to bring my highest possible leaders to come and see how we can organize investment between the two countries. But then you are covering 4 big giants, so you have to start somewhere. That is why I have started with Sweden and Norway. Next, I think we are left with Denmark and Iceland.
100%. Yes. Just to touch on Denmark quickly before I let you go, very, very, very briefly, how would you describe our relations with Denmark? I know, of course, we don't have a huge trade balance with them, but in as far as the relations are concerned, how could you describe them?
Yes, Denmark also assisted us during the liberation struggle. It also assisted us after the independence in terms of capacity building. They did that. But then we need also to focus on potential investment areas.
All right.
But
Comrade Ambassador, thank you so much for making time out to join us on Diplomatic Communique. We will, of course, keep in touch as those developments come about during your tenure in the Nordic states. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, of course, Ambassador Liswaniso is the ambassador to Norway, Sweden, Denmark, as well as Iceland, of course, representing us in the Nordic states with regards to bilateral relations and making sure that there is, of course, benefits coming out of that for Namibians. That brings us to the end of today's edition of Diplomatic Communique. It's been great being in your company for tonight. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.